Everyone, I'm Lee, Intergroup Third Legacy Chair, Greater Seattle Intergroup Third Legacy Chair. Third Legacy, an intergroup here is about connecting AA members with service opportunities. Everything from emptying ashtrays at your home group. Oh, I should change that to making coffee.
You should.
Making coffee at your home group, to representing your group as a GSR, or volunteering here at Intergroup. If you've ever wondered how to get more involved, what AA service really looks like beyond meetings, that's what we're here to support. Service in AA isn't about titles, it's about showing up, staying sober, and helping others find what we've been given. Whether you're making coffee or representing your group conference, you're keeping the lights on for the next alcoholic. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Lee. So again, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Traditions Workshop sponsored by the Third Legacy Committee here at Seattle Intergroup. And I am going to turn it over to Julie, who has graciously agreed to facilitate today's workshop.
Thank you so much, Lara. My name is Julie, and I'm an alcoholic, and it's a great honor to be asked to do anything for Alcoholics Anonymous. So,
Hi,
Julie. Hi, everybody. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity. We're going to move through all 12 traditions in the next few hours, so be a great overview. I feel like I'd like to start by reading Appendix 1, the AA tradition. It's the reason we're here. So Appendix 1 says that to those now in its fold, Alcoholics Anonymous has made the difference between misery and sobriety, and often the difference between life and death. AA can, of course, mean just as much to uncounted alcoholics not yet reached. Therefore, no society of men and women ever had a more urgent need for continuous effectiveness and permanent unity. We alcoholics see that we must work together and hang together, else most of us will finally die alone. The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous are, we AAs believe, the best answers that our experience has yet given to those ever-urgent questions. How can AA best function? And how can AA best stay whole and so survive? So we have a variety of folks that are going to share their experience, strength, and hope on each of the traditions for, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 minutes, and then there'll be some time for comments or questions. We might break halfway through, I don't know, but it's my great pleasure to introduce my dear friend who's going to talk about unity and the first tradition. You look a long way to find someone who loves AA more than my good friend Joe. So take it away, sis.
Thank you so much, Julie. Hello, everyone. I'm Joe. I'm an alcoholic. And it's very nice to be at the Seattle Intergroup office. I love it there. And I was, Julie asked me to talk about unity in AA, and it's my wheelhouse, I guess. It's the most important thing that I know and I have, and the most important gift that I can pass along. Many of us can recall the first time that we went to an AA meeting, knowing that you people were all going to be a little bit worse than we were, and probably not really smart, and probably not dressed as nicely, or ready to reach the world the way we could, but maybe, just maybe, you might have something that we didn't. I did not come to AA to become a different person, to correct my character defects, to become part of something much bigger than I am. I came because I wanted to, I came to straighten out my husband. You guys didn't do that for me. But what you did was you helped me to learn what true powerlessness was, and to find a power greater than me who gave me a life that I could never have dreamed of. Unity in AA is such an important part of what we live. And, you know, when we look at the AA symbol, it's a circle around a triangle. And that circle is what symbolizes our unity. And it's the first thing we see when we look at that. We talk about service, unity, and recovery as the 3 parts of our program. The unity is part at every level. We have one-to-one, we have alcoholics, who can share with other alcoholics. And that's where true understanding can come into place. Being able to identify with another alcoholic, but also being able to understand that although our situations and circumstances are not necessarily alike, our hearts are, and that's where we fit together. When you walk into an AA meeting for the first time, when I walk into the Seattle Intergroup office, unity is a feeling, and it's palpable there. It really is. Just knowing that there is something here that not just keeps me alive, but gives me a life worth living. That reaching out to other alcoholics and them reaching back is what can make my life truly, truly worth living, and can help me to become a person that I never knew I could be. And I'm very grateful to be able to be. I know that when I meet new people who come into AA, very often that's the first thing they'll say. First of all, they'll say, "You don't understand, and I don't trust anybody." And then they'll say, "Wait a minute, that sounds like me." And that's where our unity comes in. That's why we have all our other traditions, keeping out outside influences, not discussing other topics in AA. If I come to my first AA meeting and people had discussed smoking or not smoking, I wouldn't have belonged. I'm fortunately blessed, but I've never had a problem with smoking. If they discuss street drugs or, oh, God forbid, if they discuss quitting sugar, I wouldn't have fit. And I don't know if I would have come back. And I don't know if I would have been able to find the life that I've found in AA. For 43 years, I've been showing up to meetings all over the United States and online all over the United States and all over the world. I've been able to meet people who I know that I love and who understand me, whether I have met them before or not at all. And it's that unity, that common purpose that we have, and the common reason that we're here. That keeps us together and helps us to move forward and continue to reach the alcoholic who still suffers. I really hope that we can continue to be there for those who are yet to come, because I don't think alcoholism is going to go away anytime soon. And we have something to offer that no one else has. Thank you for being here today and moving forward in a spirit of service, unity, and love. I'm really looking forward to this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. I love you and I appreciate you. And the camera's kind of moved. There we go. Would anybody else like to comment on tradition 1? Feel free to unmute or come up to the mic. We've got lots of readings about tradition 1. I could just read the long form real quick and then we can move along. Let's see. The long form of tradition 1 says, each member of Alcoholics Anonymous is but a small part of a great whole. AA must continue to live, or most of us will surely die. Hence, our common welfare comes first, but individual welfare follows close afterward. I see both Geraldine and Mike have their hands up. Take it away.
Hey guys, I'm an alcoholic. My name is Geraldine, and I'm very happy to be here today. I knew that this is what I ask people a lot of times when they don't want to go to tradition meetings and they don't want to study the traditions. I ask them, if when you were desperate, when it was over, when you were completely lost, if there was no AA, where would you have gone? What would you have done? And just the idea of that blows my mind. And it's personal. I'm not going to lie. I have a younger daughter who's the daughter of an alcoholic, who's engaged to the son of an alcoholic, who will be engaged to the son of an alcoholic. And I wonder about my grandchildren. And I wonder about those things. And And I think the most important thing, and then I'll stop because I know Mike wants to come in. We have to be willing to let go of our own egos and our personal agendas to support the common welfare. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well said. Morning, Mike.
Morning, Mike, recovered alcoholic. You know, both Geraldine and Joe said it. You know, I came in here not to do anything other than get sober. And all of a sudden, you know, if I ignore these traditions, I have ideas. I have personal ideas. I have personal ambitions. I have things I want to do, things I can do to change Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous is just fine without Mike L. And it has been, and it will be. And these traditions in the long form that you read is that, as well as the appendix, that uncounted alcoholics not yet reached are the ones that we're doing this for. You know, I'm not here for me anymore. I'm here for that, as it said, the uncounted alcoholic. When I came into the Wallingford group, 1983. Wow, I'm so happy to be here in Seattle because I did not know that. First group I went into, first meeting was Wallingford. Wow, and so to be here is really special. But you know, this unification, or the where does it say? It says in the 12 and 12, it talks about the heartbeat, and it talks about without unity, the heart of AA would cease to beat. Our world arteries would no longer carry the life-giving grace of God. We know what the heart does for the body. We know so the heart does the same thing for Alcoholics Anonymous. And then the last thing I'll say, just a little further down, there isn't a fellowship on earth which lavishes more devoted care upon the individual members. Surely there is none which more jealously guards the individual's right to think, talk, and act as he wishes. See, I can do all that. But am I doing it in the responsible way? Am I doing it in the respectful way? That's what the traditions give us, is the respect and the responsibility that I don't come here with. I need you all to show me how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. Anybody else have anything to say about tradition 1? All right, thank you. Everybody who commented, you know, Geraldine reminds me that our traditions are here to keep this deal going in case my grandchildren or great-grandchildren would ever need it. In spite of folks like me who roll in here with bright ideas to improve on a deal that got along just fine without me for a long time, but I didn't do very well with that. So thank you all. So on to tradition 2. It is my great pleasure to introduce my friend Kelly, who's going to talk about tradition 2. Help me welcome her. Always a treat to get to hug Kelly in person.
Hello, everybody. My name's Helen Alcoholic. I'm going to read a little bit on page 133 on tradition 2. I'm going to read a little bit about vexation dwelling past. Going pain now be suffered. Panhandlers, panhandlers, lonely heart time. Problem to sound like a avalanche. Their one from murmurs are heard in the body politic, which fall in a loud cry. Do these old timers think they can run the grip? Have an election. The founders and his grounds are heard and deployed. They rush from crisis to crisis, from number pleading, but it's no use. Revolution is on. The good conscience is about to take over. Now comes the election. If the founder and his friends have served well, they may to their surprise be reinstated for a time. If, however, they have heavily resisted the rising tide of democracy, they may similarly be peace. In either case, the group now has a so-called rotating committee. Very sharply limited authority in no sense whatever can if members govern or direct the group. They are servants. There is sometimes basis privilege of doing the group chore. Headed by the chairman, they look after public relations and arrange meetings. Their conjurers strictly accountable takes money from the house. That is how banks pays the rent and other bills, makes a regular report after the meetings. The secretary sees the literature on the table, looks after the phone answers the mail and sends out notices of meetings. Such are the simple services that enable the group to function. The committee gives no spiritual advice, judges no one conduct, issues no orders. Every one of them may be probably eliminated at the next election if they try this. And so they make the belated discovery that they are favored mass senators. These are universal experiences of throughout AA, that the group conscious decree the terms upon which its leaders are served. Now, this brings us straight to the question: does AA have real leadership? Most emphatically, the answer is yes. Notwithstanding the feeling lack of it. Now, turn again to the disparate foundation is strange. But it becomes a thing. If the agreed child wears away, a subtle change begins. Ultimately, they divide into two classes known as AA lands of the elder statesmen, and the bleeding deacons. The elder statesman is the one that sees the wisdom of the group decision, who holds no resentment over if you do status, whose judgment fortified by considerable experience is sound, and who is willing to sit quietly on the sideline, patiently waiting to develop. The bleeding deacon is one who is just convinced but the group cannot get along without him. Who constantly connives for re-election to office and who continues to be consumed with self-pity. As soon as authority that drained of all a spirit of principle, they get wrong. At times, a landscape seems to be littered with bleeding forms, and nearly every order of Bhutan society has gone through the process in some degree. I'm going to start practicing. My name is Kelly, I'm an alcoholic. I want to share my experience recently in a group that was formed during the pandemic. This group is run by deaf people who use American Sign Language, and it blossomed to the point where more and more people are joining. After 2 years, we noticed that the people who were wanting a meeting were staying and staying, wanting a team meeting, not having the period of rotation. I mean, we seem to be controlling the group more and more every time each year has passed. And for the past 6 months this year, 2025, I believe has been running since December 2020. Some of the members were coming to me. I was not running the group. They were coming to me, they're not letting me in the Zoom meeting. And I was like, why not? Oh, because I'm a woman and I talk a lot. And I'm like, I mean, the only requirement, I'm sorry, that's tradition fee. Only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. Why are they not letting you in? I didn't understand. So I went to the business meeting for the next 2, 3 months, and I was able to see the two people, one in the group was somewhat controlling. Not, I couldn't see it at first, and then somehow, it was becoming more chaotic. And then all of a sudden, the two tails of that group fucked up and asked one other person to take over. And that person asked me to help take over. And I was like, so they brought the wings and gave them to me and this person. And I was like, holy cow. So I have to remember tradition one, unity. I mean, we need to hang together or die alone. Remember at the beginning, Julie was saying we need to hang together and step up. If, people go out or pass away or move away, we need to take up the reins, group going for us, current members and future members. Especially the deaf community, which is very small. And alcoholism runs higher in that community. So I had to say yes, okay, I will help. And so the next business meeting, I'm doing number next June, being the group service representative. And so I kind of like, okay, we write that passage, beginning of the good book, page 561. And I had to tweak, in American Sign Language, it's a different language. So instead of signing word for word, I had to tweak and say, it is like, without it, we're dying, with it, we don't lie. So I had to tweak them then. I said, okay, we're gonna do this and this and that. And then the group members started raising their hand. Hey, let me back up a little bit. I said, okay, for the chairs, we need to have 1 year, worth of sobriety to continue, so let's go ahead and do the election. And people are like, no, 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 no. So they raised their hands, we need to set up a bylaw, so guidelines for people who do the election. So my expectation was to be the interim chair for 1 month. Instead, the group decided they wanted to do the guidelines first, set up the guidelines, then gave us 2 interim chairs to stay on for 3 months instead of 1 month. So I was like, okay, just be a service. I mean, my expectation is 1 month, then it prolonged a few months. So in the meantime, they're tweaking the guidelines and then go ahead and elect in November, which is in a couple of weeks. Many of the members came up to me after the business meeting, saying, thank you. I mean, they're really scared of the group to fall apart. The most for my chairs were completely and forcing people to open the video when the guidelines say there's no requirement to have the video cloud, all those little things online. And the other chair went through this meeting to get some help from people who are very knowledgeable about the position. And they came to the next business meeting, gave feedback. The other members were, wow, the hearing member came to our meeting with an interpreter how that we need to do good inventory to ensure that the group stay together. the time and future members. So that's my experience.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you, thank you. Other comments on tradition 2? Thanks, Geraldine. Go right ahead.
I'm waiting for Mike. Okay, good afternoon again. My name is Gigi Gerald. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you so much, Kelly. I love when we get personal experiences with it, right? Because it comes alive for me when I get that. And I absolutely love that. Thank you. You know, Bill Wilson said that our traditions support unification versus disintegration by the application of these principles. And that's a really good way for me to remember it because I like little poems. And each one of our traditions teaches us something, right? Tradition 1 also let me know how dangerous it is to be a loner in this program, to not become unified with the fellowship. And tradition 2 enables me to see God from a loving perspective, sanity, by trusting the voice of the group conscience rather than my own voice. I always talk about traditions 2 and 9 as being brothers from another mother, or twins, because they kind of overlap. But what I love about it, it's just like step 2. It reminds me that a higher power is greater than any individual, than any group, and that the tradition allows us to experience this humility by recognizing where our direction comes from. And that's exactly what we get in step 2. You know, no one person leads the group. We become willing to speak our truth, but remain open to others' opinions and let go of the results. If it doesn't go the way I wanted it to go, then I have no choice but to just let go of it. The group conscience is the higher authority. And the beautiful thing about that is that tradition 2 allows for all concepts of a higher authority, a higher power to be in the room. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Miss Lara.
Yes, my name's Lara, I'm an alcoholic.
Lara.
I really appreciate this tradition. And I really appreciate that it says there are leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think that's important to understand who our leaders are. They are but trusted servants, they do not govern. That, of course, is a delicate balance, and it's really difficult to kind of walk that line, toe that line, especially as a, you know, an opinionated woman. People don't really like to hear me say things sometimes, but I think it's important to understand our obligation to harken back to the unity, which all the traditions harken back to tradition 1, you know, to keep our unity and to keep our fellowship complete. So anyway, I appreciate this tradition. Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. I'd like to pass along something that was shared with me, taught to me by a past delegate. Some people here might remember Steve C. He really emphasized and re-emphasized, you know, when we wonder, well, who's in charge around here, right? Well, it's a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. So how does that happen? And he really taught me that the thing about a group conscience, you know, we can learn by what things are and what they're not. And what it's not is a vote. It is not a vote. He said, a real group conscience is where we discuss and listen to one another and and maybe discuss for a number of months or years, like when Washington split into 2 areas, right? We talk about it and we pray about it and we gather more information and we get a sense of how the group feels about the issue and why, so that the vote is simply a formality. And I think that's especially important for our GSRs who are going to go from the home group, where we learn this is how my group feels and why they feel that way, and then onto the assembly to become a part of a new group conscience, where they're going to listen and learn things that perhaps if their group was there to hear what they were hearing, they might feel completely different about it. So, I've seen some kind of a higher power have its way with the minority opinion. And I've seen examples where, there was no room for any kind of a loving God to come in, because we're alcoholics and we want what we want when we want it. So another opportunity to be grateful for our traditions. And it's a good thing we've got them, because our book says we're undisciplined, and so we are. So tradition 3,
Yes.
we get to hear back from Lara. I was trying to remember whether I've known Joe or Lara longer. I think Joe.
Probably, I mean,
But it's close, yeah. I've known you both a long time, and I love you so much.
I'd like to thank Julie for agreeing to do this. When she told me that she was went with Joe down to Oregon, to do a traditions workshop, I thought, why don't you do that up here? And so here we are. So thanks everybody for showing up today. Again, my name's Lara, I'm an alcoholic. So it was Julie who first introduced to me. I mean, I sat in many tradition studies, and of course in an AA meeting, typically groups will read out of the 12 steps and 12 traditions. And very rarely do they get other literature out to expand on the tradition. So I was familiar with what the 12 and 12 had to say about the traditions, but when Julie suggested having a tradition study, and that we study from language of the heart, and AA comes of age, and we get out a few of the pamphlets, the 12 traditions illustrated, the 12 traditions checklist, and that we have a more expansive study of the 12 traditions. That's when I learned. So we were graced to have Julie as a home group member at my home group for a few years, and she was very informative about the traditions, and I've learned a lot from Julie, and I continue to learn a lot about the traditions from Julie. So and how important they are. So tradition 3. I feel like I need to read the long form. Sorry, I don't have it.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah,
Expected.
it's probably in my phone club somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So long form of tradition 3. Our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover. Nor ought AA membership ever depend upon money or conformity. Any 2 or 3 alcoholics together gathered for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided that as a group they have no other affiliation. And I know that Julie and I have stayed up talking with other folks till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning about this tradition. And because it's very common for people who are not alcoholics and attending AA meetings to say, well, the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And I'm a member when I say I am. And both of those statements are absolutely true. However, hearkening back to, like I said, tradition 1 and the unity of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's important to talk about this a little bit more. So I do want to just read a little bit out of Language of the Heart. And most of you probably know Language of the Heart, or Bill Wilson's writings about the traditions that were first presented in the AA Grapevine. So I won't read the whole thing. It's not very long, but it says, even in self-protection, we do not wish to erect the slightest barrier between ourselves and the fellow alcoholic who still suffers. And I've just highlighted some things that I'm going to read. If he is anything, the sick alcoholic is a rebellious nonconformist. How well we understand that. Every member of AA was once a rebel himself. Hence, we cannot offer to meet him on any halfway mark. We must enter the dark cave where he is and show him that we understand. If we raise obstacles, he might stay away and perish. He might be denied his priceless opportunity. But certainly there must be things that I have to do to believe. And we say there are no musts. We have something priceless to give if only you receive. So in the last paragraph, let us of AA therefore resolve that we shall always be inclusive and never exclusive, offering all we have to all, save our title. May all barriers be thus leveled, may our unity thus be preserved, and may God grant us a long life and a useful one. So this is, I like to think that this is a pretty idealistic version of tradition 3. We want to be inclusive. We don't want to be exclusive, regardless of what your other affiliations or afflictions might be. And it's very important that that be the first and foremost in what we are trying when we're welcoming someone into Alcoholics Anonymous. That being said, there's more, more has come about, more writings since the history, during the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not going to be as eloquent about this as Julie or somebody else could have been, but what I would say is that this heavy pamphlet, Problems Other Than Alcohol, really talks a lot about how to handle the drug addict who comes into Alcoholics Anonymous. And they do talk about drug addicts who are also afflicted with alcoholism and drug addicts who are not also alcoholics. So it says here, consequently, this problem of drug addiction in its several forms lies close to us all. It stirs our deepest interest and sympathy. In the world around us, we see legions of men and women who are trying to cure or escape their problems by this means. Many AAs, especially those who have suffered these particular addictions, are now asking, what can we do about drugs within our fellowship and without? And of course, this just continues to be a massive problem in society, even more now than I think it seems like than ever. And so, of course, we have a solution to alcoholism, right? That Narcotics Anonymous has adopted to address drug addiction. So this way, steps 2 through 12 work for many, many addictions. Obviously, that's why there's so many 12-step programs. But as the first step, and our relatability to one another, that sets us apart from therapy, sets us apart from other 12-step programs. So it is the first step of one alcoholic working with another that must be maintained. It says here, our first duty as a society is to ensure our own survival. Therefore, we have to avoid distractions and multi-purpose activity. An AA group as such cannot take on all the personal problems of its members, let alone the problems of the whole world. Again, that's out of the Problems Other Than Alcohol. Then, of course, which I'm sure will come up in the next tradition, but each group is autonomous and we have the right to be wrong and we protect their right to be wrong. So each group can, of course, handle this situation in any way their group conscience sees fit, which is great. We wouldn't want it any other way because we wouldn't belong to a society that told us what to do anyway, right? So these are suggestions that have grown out of experience. I sort of feel like that it's my obligation to protect the unity of Alcoholics Anonymous for the reasons that have already been stated, which is that if this program and this fellowship ceases to exist, that would be not so great. I did want to just talk about the difference between open meetings and closed meetings, just a little bit pertaining to this tradition. This comes out of the AA group pamphlet. And so the purpose of all AA group meetings, as their preamble states, is for AA members to share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. Toward this end, AA groups have both open and closed meetings, which I just, if I know that it's a very popular to hear that a drug is a drug is a drug, and that addiction is addiction is addiction. And that's a very popular stance even still. I suppose it came out of the, I don't know, the treatment centers of the 80s, 90s, and it's just sort of, it just sort of is, you know, it's very hard to find a pure alcoholic anymore, but they exist. And so drug addiction and alcoholism are found in our fellowship, in our fellowship. But that's why it's even more important to differentiate here. I was told when I was being taken through my first step of the big book, it was really important to figure out what I was powerless over, so that I knew who I was going to be able to help when it was my turn to reach out my hand. So just because I'm an alcoholic in recovery doesn't mean that I can help the fentanyl addict that's over in the parking lot. I can help him find someone who can help him, but I don't understand that addiction. That's not my experience. It breaks my heart, but it's not my experience. But I think it's important that we remain helpful, but not at the expense of relatability to the newcomer coming into Alcoholics Anonymous. So the difference between an open and closed meeting here is open meetings are available to anyone interested in Alcoholics Anonymous program of recovery, right, from alcoholism. Non-alcoholics may attend open meetings as observers, which is interesting to me. That means somebody who is an alcoholic, this could be construed as somebody who is a non-alcoholic but who is a recovering drug addict, can attend my home group, my AA meeting home group, as an observer. That when they talk, if they were to talk in my meeting, it might cease to be an AA meeting at that point, because there's other affiliations, which of course happens in my meeting, and not my meeting, but in my home group. And it's okay. It's not like it's affecting AA as a whole necessarily, but it can affect the people who are coming in who are seeking a solution to their alcoholism. If they're coming in and they're hearing a lot of talk about drugs. So at my home group, what we do is we read the blue card, right? The blue card where it talks about, please keep your talk around issues with alcohol. I think that's enough talking out of me. I could read about AA Comes of Age. When my service sponsor took me through the traditions, we start with Language of the Heart. Then we read the 12 and 12 tradition. Then we go to AA Comes of Age, and then finish it off with some pamphlets. And you can kind of see the progression of where Bill started with his idealism in Language of the Heart and the inclusivity of Alcoholics Anonymous, and kind of where he ends up with, through experience over the next 20, 25 years, of where he ends up with what exactly that means, and who AA can help and who AA cannot help. So, I started, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so
Yes.
much, Lara. I love you. All right, I know there'll probably be plenty of comments. Share this business of open and closed meetings. My home group for many years was a closed meeting that had an open meeting on the last Saturday of the month, so that families could come and celebrate AA anniversaries. And one of those times I mentioned that, well, since it's an open meeting, I might mention how helpful Al-Anon has been. And somebody took me aside, somebody with less time, by the way, Mark.
How dare you.
Anyway, and said, you know, Julie, in open meetings where there may be people visiting who are learning about what AA is and what it isn't, and what we do and what we don't do, it's especially important in those open meetings that we stick to our single purpose. You know, like Lara said, some of us may have used drugs, some of us may have mental health, and we might have all kinds of issues. But I know that there's one thing that we all share here. So Gigi, you're up with Mike right after you.
Hi, guys. Everybody must be getting so sick of hearing from me at this point. You know, yeah, I know, Mike, I know you are. this tradition is very important, I think, to know where certain traditions came out of. This one came out of segregation. So right then and there, we learn that Bill Wilson had a reason for doing the things that he did, and that was very clever of him. And so he wanted to make sure all alcoholics could sit in the same room, regardless of anything. Alcoholics. I'm going to share a little bit of personal experience. First of all, I went to a meeting where when I first got sober, I thought they were very harsh. If you did not identify as an alcoholic and only an alcoholic, they asked you to leave. And they said, you can come back when you're ready to say you're an alcoholic and only an alcoholic, but they were not going to let anyone's ego interfere with their primary purpose. My very first AA meeting that I went to, I didn't really think I belonged there. And I am exactly what the speaker referred to as a pure alcoholic. There is nothing else in my story. Nothing. I smoked 1 or 2 joints when I was 15 years old, and that was it. So there's absolutely nothing in my story but alcohol. But because I was hearing so many people say that they were ANDAs, I thought that you had to be more than an alcoholic to belong here. And I'm glad I didn't leave. And also alcohol's not a drug, it's a spirit. That's very clear. And that's why I get frustrated when people say is exactly what the speaker was saying. A drug is a drug is a drug. Well, alcohol is not a drug. It's a spirit. And there's a huge difference. Because when I take a pill, for whatever reason, even if I take a Motrin, it does not set off a reaction in my body where I have to have more Motrin. And that's the difference. So thank you. I'll get out of the way of.
Thanks, Gigi.
Mm.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike, recovered alcoholic, and I just love Geraldine, and I do have to go behind her because she's much more full of wisdom than me, or full of something. I'm Mike, and I'm an alcoholic and no, don't do that, Mike. No, you know, and that's the key to it. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter in what else I am in Alcoholics Anonymous. The reason there's a long form is it's more explicit and more able to give me direction than the short form. And why, you know, and this goes back to what I said earlier in all the traditions too, respect and responsibility. You know, and yeah, we can come in here, we can do what we want in here. I read about it. We can, absolutely. That's what the traditions, they're just guidelines. If I don't want to act as Alcoholics Anonymous and the spiritual program of action compels me to act that way, I can suffer from untreated alcoholism all day long. But these traditions, and this one especially, relates to 2 in terms of now all of a sudden I'm on a level playing field. Because there's no one in Alcoholics Anonymous, I love this one, right, Geraldine? No one in Alcoholics Anonymous is more important than anybody else. I hear that, you probably hear that too. Who's the most important person in the room? Well, it tells us in tradition 5, the suffering alcoholic. The suffering alcoholic. So this is the great equalizer where we're all alcoholics. I don't have to think I can, I'm not one of those, and I'm not that, and I'm not like Geraldine described. I'm not sure I belong, because everybody's an ANDA. You know, and going to, if we want to know what the solution is to alcoholism, it's on page 17. And then more importantly, when it tells us about that solution, anybody know how strong cement is? Anybody familiar with that? It says the feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. Nothing else binds me with you all. It goes on to talk about that because I love that part too, other than alcoholism. The tremendous fact for every one of us is we found a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree upon. We all can agree upon that. We can all join hands in that. Right? There's probably not one other thing that we can all agree upon, as in one other thing in life in the world that we can all agree upon. And the tremendous fact that we can all agree upon that we're alcoholics gives me the next page where the ex-problem drinker, in a few hours, armed with these facts, can win. I can't remember the word, can win the confidence of another alcoholic. Maybe that's what it is. In a few hours. I've tried to help a crystal meth addict. And you know what the best way to help him was? Send him to a CM meeting. You know, I've heard other stories. I'm not going to spend the time here because, yeah, like Geraldine, you're going to be sick of hearing from me if I stick around long enough. So this tradition is so much about respect and responsibility that when I deviate from that, whether I believe it or not, the disrespect I am oozing out of is just evident, is not demonstrating the principles of the program. So being an alcoholic, again, is the most important and the only thing I need to connect with you on. And thank God. So, oh boy, I'm done. So much more I could say. Come on, Bill, you say something.
Not so much, you're not done. Unless anybody else wants to comment briefly on tradition 3.
I do.
All right, Kelly, come on down.
My name's Kelly, I'm an alcoholic.
Kelly,
For the past 5 years in that community meetings, I've seen so many people have a addictions like cigarettes, marijuana, or other stuff. When they come to the AA meetings, oh, I've done so and so. But when they stop, and then they start drinking, then they realize they're alcoholics after all. They stop doing what they did to those things. So basically, if you look at page 31 of the big book, here are the mothers required to control our drinking. Drinking beer only or so, smoking or eating or whatever. But then, we have a lot of super addictions. So basically, we are without a higher power to keep us wrong. And it's a thinking disease and the phenomenon that Canadian, whether it be alcohol and other stuff. And then it goes back and forth. So, yeah, that's my experience.
Beautiful, beautiful. Anybody else? All right, so on to tradition 4. Please help me welcome my friend, Mike.
Thanks, Julie. Mike, recovered alcoholic. I still can't get over the fact that I'm in Seattle, and this first meeting I went to, I called that hotline, back sometime October of 1983. And I still remember the guy as old as me or older that, I met at a meeting. Wow, how cool is this? So I am a recovered alcoholic. Out to Breakfast Online is my home group. And I'm a newbie to the traditions. From some of you I've heard of about 7-8 years of my 42 years. I mean, I just picked them up essentially. And so I love talking about and hearing about it and hearing your experience on the traditions. Of course, I say talking first because alcoholics like to do what? Talk, So, and I better talk truth because Doug's here, so I'm really in trouble now. So, I picked a couple things to read from, after all, and I'm not, thank you for, was it Laura who mentioned all the tradition pieces that we have, pieces of literature. I'm going to start with AA Comes of Age, because truly, from my perspective, if you want to know the history of the traditions, if you want to know about Alcoholics Anonymous, where it came from, AA Comes of Age, starting on page 79, Unity, that section describes why we're here, how we got here, how our group survived. And so it starts, where am I going to start? I'm going to start on page 105. And I'm going to read about, and this, oh, no, I'm not going to start there. I'm going to start with the long form of tradition 4. And that says, with respect to its own affairs, each AA group should be responsible to no other authority than its own conscience. But when its plans concern the welfare of neighboring groups also, those groups ought to be consulted. And no group, regional committee, or individual should ever take any action that might greatly affect AA or affect AA as a whole without conferring with the trustees of the General Service Board. On such issues, our common welfare is paramount. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to punt. Mike's going to change the way he's going. The first thing I'm going to refer to is from the 67th General Service Conference report. A guy named Billy N. talked about tradition 4. And it goes something like this. He said, AA leaders have a sacred duty to, above all else, embrace all 12 traditions. I do not believe we should ever look for a way around a tradition. I firmly believe that you can't ask a newcomer to observe one tradition while you ignore a few others. I believe it is time for many in Alcoholics Anonymous to stop using the 4th tradition to break the other traditions. History shows that the 4th tradition was not created as a veto, to be a veto over the others. Rather, it was created to give groups flexibility regarding group customs. If any group breaks a tradition, it is affecting other groups and AA as a whole. So customs, I'm going to focus on that to start with. AA customs. Early on, maybe it wasn't early on, but so I live in Oregon. I travel a little bit. I remember specifically, starkly going to Chattanooga, Tennessee, going into a meeting, and meetings generally are an hour and a half. I remember they were an hour and a half in Seattle when I went up there. I mean, the thought when I came to Oregon after a year of sobriety was, boom, yeah, only an hour. I have to sit and listen to y'all, instead of that hour and a half. So then I go down to Chattanooga at some point, and, they did some things. First of all, what they didn't do, and all this in my head was wrong, they didn't read how it works.
Blasphemy.
What? Yeah. And they did some other things. I mean, the length of the meeting, I think they ended it at 45 minutes. And, I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea. It's the same thing as I go into a group, and here's a frivolous thing, but here it is too, customs. Julie's group serves cookies and mine serves cake. Well, Julie, your group's doing it wrong. Come on, what's wrong with you? Or God forbid we go over across the pond and they're serving tea and not coffee. Group customs. Each group, by the way, does that relate to tradition 2? The group conscience, the group members get together and we're going to have coffee and food on those Brits. We're not having tea. Group customs. My group doesn't have its own set of traditions. Words mean something in Alcoholics Anonymous, and traditions or customs are absolutely different. The customs relate to, an hour and a half versus an hour. A men's versus a woman's meeting. Read the traditions in the meeting or don't read the traditions. What we don't do is break traditions, say those traditions as I read that Billy N. so eloquently put. We don't look for a way around the traditions. We don't think that we know better than Alcoholics Anonymous and the group conscience of Alcoholics Anonymous, which, by the way, meets once a year. It's a general service conference in, I think it's April. That's the conscience of Alcoholics Anonymous, not Mike L's group. So the other thing is, see if we're funny. And I'll Here's what I mentioned, the two R's, right? Respect and responsibility. So in the 12 Traditions Illustrated, as always, freedom. In Alcoholics Anonymous, remember, we're free to do whatever we want, literally. Brings responsibility. Fourth tradition is like the fourth step. It suggests that the AA group should take honest inventory of itself, asking about each of the independently planned actions, asking about each of its independently planned actions. Would this break any tradition? Like the individual member who chooses to make the steps his or her guide towards happy sobriety, the WISE group recognizes that the traditions are not hindering technicalities. They are approved guides towards the chief objective of all AA groups. Now, let's see if I can find my favorite part of this tradition is where it says, oh, here, okay, liberty. It talks about liberty. I'm back to 105. I haven't started on 105, have I? AA comes of age. Where is it? Oh, okay. I'm going to go back to 104. So we've heard things like, and here it is, we have the right to be wrong, right? We've heard that. And Billy kind of addressed that. But it says, thus under tradition 4, this is 104 and AA comes of age. Thus, under tradition 4, an AA group had exercised its right to be wrong. I'm not reading the part where this group decided that. But that's where a lot of people land. We have the right to be wrong. Well, let me put it in an individual perspective. How about? Lily, is that okay if I talk about an individual experience? So, as someone who did not understand or know AA spiritual principles, you know, as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought, I mean, I could be dishonest, couldn't I? I can lie to Mrs. L about where I go sometimes. I could lie. I have the right to do that. Now, Mrs. L, I'm out on my butt if I do that, right? But I have the right to do that. Let's relate that to our groups. Is it okay to be wrong? Does being wrong, here's my favorite, and Bill N, I think is the one, is being wrong, does having the right to be wrong make wrong right? We know we're wrong. We know we're going to do wrong as a group. We're going to do it anyway. We're going to break the tradition anyway. We're going to allow non-alcoholics to speak in our group meeting. That was an example that we just heard. We know it's wrong to not read conference-approved literature, like a preamble prior to 2021, I think it was. We're going to read it how we want to. That's wrong, but we're going to. Is doing wrong make wrong right? Not in my life today. And I hope not in the group's life, in your group's life, in other groups' life. That's why we have this responsibility to learn about the traditions, to study them, so that as we go out as member of our home group, we can carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the message is not stay sober. Just stay sober. Go ahead and stay sober. That's all you need to do. Put the plug in the jug. Oh my God. If that's the message, I'd be dead. Because in 2005, I wanted to kill myself. Yeah, bang, bang, kill myself. And I was sober. But I didn't know how to or what to practice these spiritual principles. I didn't hear it. I didn't make myself available to it. So tradition 4, as the groups rely upon, there are, you know, and I'm going to go back to freedom. Individual freedom, group freedom. And what is, as I described in 2005 for me, what's the ultimate? I can't stand it anymore. Page 105 in the AA Comes of Age talks about that. Because there's an ultimate, there is discipline to be had in Alcoholics Anonymous. There is penalties and page 105. It says many people wonder how AA can function under such seeming anarchy. We can do what we want, right? Other societies have to have law and force and sanction and punishment administered by authorized people. Happily for us, we found we need no human authority whatever. Here it is. We have two authorities which are far more effective. Effective in what? Human authority. One is benign, the other's malign. There is a God our Father who very simply says, I am waiting for you to do my will. The other one, the other authority is named John Barleycorn. And he says, you had better do God's will or I am going to kill you. And sometimes he does kill. We've seen it. We know it. I've experienced almost. And so these spiritual principles that Alcoholics Anonymous is wrapped around are not for me to determine which ones I get to live and which ones I get to break. If I truly respect, truly am responsible to carry this message, what Geraldine's going to talk about in 5. If I truly, truly am that person, then these traditions are for me to follow, for me not to change to my own ambitions, but to understand, study, and carry on so that the alcoholic around the corner who hasn't found the rooms yet can find the Alcoholics Anonymous that saved all of our lives and continues to give us lives, at least in my case, beyond my wildest imagination. Oh, okay, enough of me, Julie. Thank you so much for the opportunity. God bless.
Thanks a million, Mike. I just wish you could work up a little enthusiasm for this. Some questions for you guys, for Mike or anybody. So here's the thing. He mentions we have the right to be wrong, right? Our groups, I mean, I've never seen a group that does it exactly the way I think they ought to. I respect the autonomy of the group and that's fine. But here's the thing. If it's okay to have a women's group, why can't we have a Republican group? Or if we can have an agnostic group, why can't we have a Catholic group? So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there to, prime the pump. Bill's got his hand up. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Bill, and it's only the 4th tradition. Mike's just getting warmed up on the 4th tradition. He gets louder as the morning goes on, so get ready, folks. Thanks, Mike, for your lead, and I really love that you quoted Billy N., the past chair of AA World Services, and basically says that we can't use tradition 4 to break any of the other traditions. I think that's super important. And the example that I see over and over in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is I want to read how it works my way, and I get to change the language wherever I want, and that affects AA as a whole. And I think that's really important that people understand that there is a process. If I want to change the way how it works is written, I have to go to the literature committee, and there's a whole process that's involved in changing the language. But I can't just automatically change pronouns because I don't like the way they read. So anyway, thanks a lot for your lead, Mike.
Thank you.
I have a question about that.
Okay, question about that.
I'm sorry.
Great.
So I just have a question about that. Can you just let me know about how that affects AA as a whole and why group autonomy and group conscience about that topic is not the appropriate route to go.
Mhm. You want to address that, Phil?
Yeah, no.
To me, that's what the Literature Committee and Alcoholics Anonymous is all about, that if something needs to be changed in the literature, there's a process. I don't decide what gets changed the way it's read. That's what the
Mhm.
book was written for. So just because I don't like it, I can't change it. So that's what I was taught by a service sponsor.
So is there a difference between if the group says, here's the way we read it, we change pronouns, or if an individual is asked to read how it works and they individually decide that they're not gonna read it quite as written?
I don't think the group or the individual, they're the same thing. We're changing literature, whether it's a group or it's an individual. And if the group wants to change it, go ahead and write to the literature committee and say, we don't like it, and they can put it up for a vote, and 75% of all groups get to vote on it.
Just like they did the preamble. All right,
Correct.
thank you. Great. Thank you for that application. Fiji,
Hi, I also learned the traditions from Billy Noonan, and he always says that tradition 4 is used as a steamroller. And whenever a group pulls out tradition 4, most of the other ones are going right out the window. And that's the truth. And I'll be honest, I had again, when I was, I had added a meeting. What I did was, because it would have affected another group if they weren't stopping their Saturday night meeting, I wanted to add a literature meeting on Saturday night, because I knew that this group that met at 8 o'clock to 9:15 on Saturday nights was stopping their Saturday night meeting. I went to their business meeting. I asked their permission. I asked them if there was a chance that their meeting was going to come back. They said no. They said, we have our blessing, go ahead. And then at that point, I got the space and I went ahead and I established this meeting. When I left, and then my old home group called me and said, well, would you mind if we absorb this meeting into our meeting? And I said, no, I don't live there anymore. And then they said, well, we're also going to think about opening one on Tuesday nights. And I said, well, there's a meeting a half a mile away from you on Tuesday nights. Do you know what you'll do to their basket? They only meet one night a week. If you go ahead and do this, I said, in my opinion, if you have their permission, go ahead. But you need to get their permission first. And they went to the group and the group said no. And I was amazed that they adhered to that. So there are many ways that we can affect other groups or AA as a whole. And we have to keep that in mind. Thank you.
thank you. So we got Kelly and then Mike.
My name's Kelly, I'm not Howard. As I recently talked about producing views, we had a good in that community. There were 2, 3 other groups, there were, one of the business meetings. And when, okay. This particular group has changed the time of the business meeting, which conflicts with the other deaf group at the same time. So a lot of the deaf members were not able to attend one or the other. But when we can't,
Just need you to slow down the volume.
Anyway, so when the members came to the business meeting and say, hey, we don't have a home group, yeah. But I like to be of service, like being the tag person or secretary on certain days. And so after business meeting, I want to do service. But then on the other desk meeting, I want to do service too, for being the tag or service or reading or greeter. So when the business meetings coincide, we were not able to be of service. And we were not getting enough numbers to be of service on one particular group. So we decided if you want more people to come to the meeting to make more inclusive, we decided to change the British meeting to get more people involved. That's tradition 4, talking about issues that affect other groups or it is.
Thank you. I'm not sure the name of the person that has their hand up. I can't see it.
That's Katie.
Katie, You're up.
Hi, thank you, Katie Alcoholic. I I'm just sitting here listening, and I think the traditions sometimes get taken for granted in that they work, and we don't necessarily really appreciate how they work and how well they work. Um, just a side comment on me. I know I never really thought about traditions like a whole lot until you see them in action. But just a couple of things. One where I feel like tradition four directly relates to, one kind of indirectly but relevant. I had a women's meeting a couple years ago where it was decided that reading he or she was very offensive in the big book. And so it was wanted to, you could not say he or she. And there was a business meeting about it and everything. And ultimately, was decided, you cannot tell somebody whether or not how to read the big book as written, which in my mind was kind of a big victory for that meeting, because I could see where that could be a slippery slope where someone would say, well, we did it in this meeting, maybe we can do it in other meetings. So
Mm,
I could see
right.
where tradition four could be relevant there. Also, one time at intergroup, uh, every year we have an alkathon at Christmas Eve and day, and also on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, where it's it's a 24-hour thing. Holidays can be very hard, especially for newcomers. And on the committee, we were talking about someone threw out there, well, we need to be more inclusive, and so we need to allow any 12-step group that wants to come to the alkathon to come to the alkathon, and that included Overheaters Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, uh, um, Nicotine Anonymous, I mean, all the anonymouses. And some people were like, yeah, let's help other people out. But it ultimately came down to, and I know this is not like an AA thing per se, but it's still an organization put on by Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was decided, okay, this is a pretty slippery slope. If we do this, what else is it gonna, lead to? And so ultimately, this is the Alkathon put on for people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And there was a couple people that were, forgive my language, a little bit butthurt about it. But I think overall, um, it was well received, because I think, a couple people got up there and they're explained, well, this is why we shouldn't do it, blah, blah, blah. But, inclusivity. Okay, inclusivity it's not a bad thing, but if the end result is you're taking away the message of AA from a newcomer, and not to be dramatic, but killing the newcomer because we're so focused on including other people that are not alcoholics, that's a problem. Um, anyway, just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Well put. Thank you so much. All right, so. Yeah, I know, we could take any one of these traditions and talk about them all night, right? So I'm hopeful that some of us will come out of this wanting to start a more in-depth tradition study, whether we're doing. Okay, all right. So yeah, let's make sure that we get contact information before we're done. So with that, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Gigi, who will be discussing tradition 5. Take it away, sis.
Thank you. Hi, guys. I'm an alcoholic. I'm Gigi, and tradition 5, my favorite tradition, right, Mike? Why is it, Mike? Okay, so this may be a little bit different from what we've heard so far about unity, everything going back to unity. I'm telling you, it's going to be a little bit different, but keep an open mind. So the long version says, because the short version on these shades is for the general public, the long version is for us, right? Okay, each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity, having but one primary purpose, that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So this is how I was taught in New York. It's even different from what I learned from other people, including Billy, including a lot of people. I was taught that tradition 5 wears the crown. Tradition 5 is the king. All roads lead to 5. The first 4 traditions pave the way for 5, and the last 7 maintain a safe space for tradition 5 to be carried out. So with that, I'm going to go to Mike's favorite book there, Alcoholics Anonymous, AA Comes of Age, which I love. And at the end of tradition 4 on page 106, it says, much of our discussion so far leads straight to tradition 5, which states, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. We think we should do one thing well rather than many things, which we are not called to. That is the central idea of this tradition. Okay. So the next place I see it is on page 107 after tradition 5. And it says a logical outgrowth of tradition 5. Tradition 6 reads. So that is the attitude that I like to come at the traditions from. That tradition 5 teaches me what my primary purpose is. So, and the purpose of any AA group. So what's the difference between a good AA group and a good AA meeting? Well, a good AA meeting is judged from the start of the opening prayer to the end of the closing prayer. When I think about a group as a spiritual entity, we think about what happens from the closing prayer of one meeting to the opening prayer of the next meeting. What are those group members doing? Are they carrying that message to the still sick and suffering alcoholic? Are they connected to AA as a whole? Are they keeping in touch with each other? Are they helping the new alcoholic and the sick and suffering alcoholic? And are they trying to practice these principles in all our affairs? So we heard about the preamble, okay? So here was the thing. Everybody was asking everybody, well, what does the preamble mean? What does the preamble say? What does the preamble says we're not this? The preamble says we are that. And a lot of discussions about the preamble. But here is the facts about that, okay? Alcoholics Anonymous is a book. That's what it is. It is a book. And when we talk about passing the message to the alcoholic who still suffers, what message are we passing? If we are going, and the alcoholic who still suffers can be anybody in the room. Mike was the alcoholic who was still suffering at 20 something. I don't know, what does he have, like 150 years now? He was still suffering at 20 something years. I was the still sick and suffering alcohol that wanted to drive into a brick wall at 2.5 years. But the newcomer, who's the most important person in the room, Mike, besides me, it's the alcoholic who still suffers. That is the most important person in the room. So if my topic for the evening, if our group conscience meeting says, okay, so tonight we're going to read step 3 out of the 12 and 12, for example, and a newcomer walks into the room and the chairperson says, oh no, somebody just walked in, we got to go back to step 1. Or if we're on page 57 of the big book, have this happen in my in-person meeting with a man who has a lot of sobriety, a man I have tremendous respect for. We had a couple of newcomers come in when we first established the group after we were there like 4 weeks doing the big book. And I forget what page we were on. He's like, oh no, we got to go back to page 1. I said, oh no, we don't. We don't change. You know, and here's the other thing, right? The cat dying does not change the newcomer or the sick and suffering's need to hear the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. What is that message? That message is what's in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's that message. This is why we do what we do. So what happens, again, clicks, popularity contests, all of these things can divert us from, and we're talking about being diverted from our primary purpose even before we get to tradition 6. We're talking about being diverted from our primary. If somebody wants to read a poem in the middle of a discussion meeting. That is up to the chairperson to say, I'm sorry, I'll listen to your poem later. When I first walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, we had some of the three men that I really tremendously respected. Unfortunately, all three have passed on. And when the newcomer would start yammering about their day and what juices they were drinking to help them stop drinking, and one of them would say very nicely, after the meeting, I'll go outside with you and I'll listen to whatever story you want to tell me. But right now we're in a meeting and that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on our primary purpose in this meeting. So can we talk about the preamble? Well, I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from the 1940s preamble out of Texas. And I think that this really summons up our primary purpose. And it's very long. I'm only going to read a couple of paragraphs. We are gathered here because we are faced with the fact that we are powerless over alcohol and unable to do anything about it without the help of a power greater than ourselves. Funny, it doesn't say anything about men and women, people. It says we are gathered here. This is our primary purpose. And Alcoholics Anonymous is an alcoholic who, through application and adherence to the AA program, has forsworn the use of any alcoholic beverage in any form. The moment he so much takes one drop of beer, wine, spirits, or any other alcoholic beverages, he automatically loses all status as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. How about this one? How about Susie Snowflake just came back from a 3-month relapse, but we're going to let her talk tonight because we're going to let her be our speaker tonight because we don't shoot our wounded. How is transferring the message of Alcoholics Anonymous? How about this one? AA is not interested in sobering up drunks who are not sincere in their desire to remain sober for all time. That message is in the big book. What is a poisonous message? Just keep coming back. Just doesn't matter how many times you relapse. Just keep coming back. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and on which we can join in harmonious action. Our way out on which we can absolutely agree. One way. There is how many solutions, Mike? There is a solution, one. And finally, and I love this, this is what we read in our home group. In order to set the tone for this meeting, I ask that we bow our heads in a few moments of silent prayer and meditation. I wish to remind you that whatever said at this meeting expresses our own individual opinion as of today and as of up to this moment. We do not speak for AA as a whole, and you are free to agree or disagree as you see fit. In fact, it is suggested that you pay no attention to anything which might not be reconciled with what is in the AA Big Book. If you don't have a big book, it's time you bought one. Read it, study it, live with it, loan it, scatter it, and then learn from it, from what it means to be an AA. That is the message my home group conveys. And to me, that is the message. Tradition 5, our primary purpose, our first purpose. Primary means what? What we consider the most important principle. And the survival and growth of our program depends upon our willingness to carry this message of recovery by using the steps and the traditions. Thank you so much, guys, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much, Gigi. Okay, comments on Tradition 5. Kelly.
Name's Kelly, I'm an alcoholic. Many ways we can carry our primary purpose. Like you said, recently was example of my online death meeting. When we do it in management, we just job. That if you don't have a big book, let us know. We will order the big book and send it to you. As well, our future judge getting a sponsor, please put your name and contact information in the chat. It's one of the many ways to show our primary purpose in helping each other stay sober. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Anybody else have comments on tradition 5? Yeah, this is where, autonomous groups might just get together and chat about, what happened in the ball game on Sunday. But, or like you say, the newcomer who's, on day 3 for the 75th time and, or, we need to let them share. And I don't know where I got sober. They called that spreading the disease, but what can I say? Not to judge. Mike.
Mike, recovered alcoholic. Yeah, I think this also relates to, and we're going to hear about it in another tradition too, but, our primary purpose is Alcoholics Anonymous. And, when our group makes a decision to do something outside of, the traditions, as we've already heard from, yours truly, it doesn't embrace the guidelines. It doesn't embrace Alcoholics Anonymous. And when we start to say that our groups can be something special interest, and it was brought up that we can be a group with a special interest on an outside issue. And Bill wrote about the specifics, that we wouldn't and cannot help the newcomer if we're not united in one thing. If we have Catholic and Protestant groups, if we have Democratic and Republican, we are not helping the most alcoholics that we can. And that's our purpose too. We want to be appealing individually and group-wise. We do not want to be anything different than an alcoholic because that's the person I can help. And how does it affect AA as a whole? It affects the newcomer. It affects my information I get in a meeting or a group that I can carry out and say, well, this group did it that way. And this group's a Catholic group. Let's have our Protestant group. When we make those decisions as groups or individuals, absolutely affects AA groups as a whole. When I change the words and how it works, when I read it, absolutely. There's how many people in this meeting? Oh, that member can do it. Well, I can go to this group on Saturday night where I heard it done on Friday night, and I'll just change it to the way I like it. And then everybody changes it to the way that they like it. And what do we have? Do we have a message of depth and weight? When we say, how does it affect AA as a whole? I just changed one word. Well, if you can change one word, I can change one word, and everybody else can. And we're going to talk about that in Tradition 10 especially, because if my controversial opinion is important, then yours is too, and yours is too, and yours is too. And we don't have a message of unity anymore. God help us if we go down that road.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've been to meetings where when I got out my big book and went to read, I thought I might be tar and feathered. I was like, there are a ton of strength, but I mean, whatever. I liked my drink strong. I like my AA strong. I like to hear a little AA in an AA meeting, but yeah, and that's the thing about our membership, right? Is there's no requirement that people take the steps or read the book or any of that. But if they want what we have, I was desperate. I don't know if I wanted what you all had, but I definitely didn't want what I had. And I saw what you all were doing, and I had nothing to lose to give it a try. So there you go. All right. So with that, I think these traditions all kind of intertwine. So I want to thank Gigi so much for a passionate presentation of Tradition 5. And Lee is up. Help me welcome Lee.
Hello, everybody. My name's Liam. I'm alcoholic. I'm not very good at this song already. Maybe. Who knows? Tradition 6. An AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any regulated facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. A long form of that is on 190, 12 and 12. Our AA experiences taught us that problems of money, property, and authority may easily divert us from our primary spiritual aim. We think, therefore, that any considerable property of genuine use to AA should be separately incorporated and managed, thus dividing the material from the spiritual. An AA group as such should never go into business. Secondary aids to AA, such as clubs or hospitals, which require much property or administration, ought to be incorporated, and so set apart that, if necessary, they can be freely distributed or discarded by the groups. Hence, such facilities ought not use the AA name. Their management should be the sole responsibility of those people who financially support them. Clubs, AA managers are usually preferred, but hospitals, as well as other places of recuperation, ought to be well outside of AA and medically supervised. While an AA group may cooperate with anyone, such cooperation ought never go so far as affiliation or endorsement, actual or implied. An AA group can bind itself to no one. So what that means is tradition 6 protects us from outside entanglements. It reminds us that Alcoholics Anonymous has one purpose: help alcoholics to achieve sobriety, and that we must remain independent from other organizations, causes, or businesses. In the early days, some well-meaning members tried to link AA with hospitals, reform movements, treatment centers, and thinking that it would spread recovery faster. But whenever the AA name was attached to an outside venue, confusion and conflict will get into this, especially when the ventures failed or have financial troubles. By refusing to endorse, finance, or lend our name, AA avoids distractions of money and prestige that could divide members and dilute our message. This tradition allows us to cooperate with others in the field of recovery, hospitals, treatment centers, clergy, works, without affiliating with them. So, to just define a couple of these words here, endorse means to publicly approve or recommend. Finance means to give or receive money for. And to lend our name is to appear to be officially committed. AA stays neutral so that all alcoholics, no matter their background or beliefs, feel welcome. Tradition 6 keeps AA focused on carrying the message, not managing money or reputations. We can cooperate, but not affiliate. So when I was going through this, I thought it was really important to figure out where this came from. Because this, of all the traditions so far, this is the one where experience might play the most role. In AA's early years, 30s and 40s, and my group is actually reading Dr. Bob Good Old Timers right now, so it's really kind of cool. The fellowship was growing quickly, and it was still finding its identity. Many members were enthusiastic about spreading sobriety and thought AA should support or create outside ventures to help alcoholics, like hospitals, farms, clubs, or rest homes. The intentions were good, but the results were often disastrous. One of the first ones is the AA hospital idea, and it's in the 12 and 12 on page 156. Dr. Robinson, early members of Akron, dreamed of an AA-run hospital for alcoholics. They even began plans for it until they realized that it would require large sums of money, business management, and would invite outsiders' opinions. They saw that it would inevitably shift AA's focus from helping alcoholics to running a business. And so, page 156, whereupon we tried AA hospitals, they all bogged down because you cannot put an AA group into business. Too many busybody cooks spoil broth. AA groups have had their splendid education, and when they began to publicly look up the merits of this or that brand, people became confused. Did AA fix drunks, or was it an educational project? Was AA spiritual, or was it medical? Is it a reform movement? In consternation, we saw ourselves getting married to all kinds of enterprises, some good and not so good. Watching alcoholics committed to willy-nilly prisons or asylums, we began to cry, there ought to be a law. AAs commenced to thump tables in legislative committee rooms and agitated for legal reform. That made good newspaper copy, but little else. We saw that we'd soon be mired in politics. Even inside AA, we found it imperative to remove the AA name from clubs and 12-step houses. These adventures implanted a deep-rooted conviction in that no circumstances could we endorse any related enterprise, no matter how good. We of Alcoholics Anonymous could not be all things to all men, nor should we try. They also tried some AA farms and enterprises. They want to see farms and industries where recovering alcoholics could work and live. Again, same thing. Money, employment, management created divisions and resentments. When those projects failed, the public associated those failures with AA itself, damaging its credibility. And then I think kind of the big ones, the Rockefeller ones. In 1937, Bill W. and Dr. Bob approached John D. Rockefeller Jr. to fund AA. Rockefeller wisely declined, saying money would spoil this thing. Instead, he gave a small donation, $5,000, of which $3,000 were to pay Dr. Bob's mortgage, I believe. And it would help with basic expenses. I think the co-founders got $30 a week out of that money. This moment deeply influenced later traditions, especially 6 and 7. So in Dr. Bob, the Good Old Timers on page 135, talks about an associate of John D. Rockefeller named Frank Amos. In another report made later that year, Amos noted that the movement's leaders were strong conviction that commercialization of this movement must at all hazards be avoided. Furthermore, he said they believed that early publicity would be ruinous because it would result in the few present workers being swamped with requests from relatives and friends and from alcoholics themselves. As a consequence, the whole movement would probably bog down. Wasn't so much that they wanted $50,000, it was Rockefeller's name. And he didn't want, that would have been a problem for that. So the money we can talk about tradition 7, but as far as publicity goes, it's this tradition here. So the turning point, in the mid-40s, Bill W. Stone, he didn't draw clear lines between itself and outside enterprises. It would risk becoming divided, commercialized, or even corrupted. When he wrote about this in traditions, and he wrote about it in the Grapevine, and later in the 12 and 12, included tradition 6 as a safeguard to preserve AA spiritual independence. And then there was a trade experience. A liquor trade association wanted to hire a member as an educator to basically have the brewery say that too much grog is bad for everyone. And so they wanted to, be good guys in all of this. And so in the 12 and 12 on page 157, it picks up on this. And if you want to read the same story in AA Comes of Age, it's on page 108. Years ago, this principle of no endorsement was put to a vital test. Some of the great distilling companies proposed to go into the field of alcohol education. It would be a good thing, they believed, for the liquor trade to show a sense of public responsibility. They wanted to say that liquor should be enjoyed, not misused. Hard drinkers ought to slow down. And problem drinkers, alcoholics, should not drink at all. In one of the trade associations, the question arose about how this campaign should be handled. Of course, they would use the resources of press, radio, and films to make their point. But what kind of person should head the job? They immediately thought of Alcoholics Anonymous. They could find a good public relations man in our ranks. Wouldn't he be ideal? He'd certainly know the problem. His connection with AA would be valuable because the fellowship stood high in public favor and had an enemy in the world. Soon they spotted their man, and AA with necessary experience. Straightway he appeared at New York's AA headquarters asking, is there anything in our tradition that suggests I shouldn't take a job like this one? This kind of education seems good to me. and is not too controversial. Do headquarters folks see any bugs in it? At first, it looked like a good thing, then doubt crept in. The association wanted to use our member's full name in all of its advertising. He was to be described both as its director of publicity and a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Of course, there could be the slightest objection if such an association hired an AA member solely because of his public relations ability and knowledge of alcoholism. But that wasn't the whole story. For in this case, not only was the AA member to break his anonymity at the public level, he was to link his name to Alcoholics Anonymous to this particular educational project in the minds of millions. It would be bound to appear to AA that he was now promoting education, liquor trade association style. The minute we saw this compromising fact, what it was, we asked the prospective publicly director how he felt about it. Great guns, he said. Of course, I can't take the job. The ink wouldn't be dry on the first ad before the awful shriek would go up on the dry can. They'd be out with lanterns looking for an honest AA to plump for their brand of education. AA would land exactly in the middle of the wet-dry controversy. Half the field in this country would think we'd signed up with dries, and the other half would think we'd join the lights. What a mess. So, and there's a couple more paragraphs in there. So anyway, that's kind of where it all came about. Bill W. wrote that problems of money, prosperity, and authority nearly destroyed AA before it was even 10 years old. Tradition 6 that AA ensures that AA remain non-professional, unaffiliated, and focused on one thing, carrying the message.
Good job.
All right, nicely done. All right, other comments on tradition 6? Nick, on the subject of clubs, it's interesting. We've got, I'm sure wherever you are, you've got AA clubhouses, and here they're all different. You know, we've got AA clubhouse. Well, I shouldn't say AA clubhouses because they're not, right? But there are clubs where it's nothing but AA meetings all day. But there's also clubs that have other meetings along with the AA meetings. And, you know, if a group meet, we've got AA clubs where all of the meetings there are a part of one group. We have other AA clubs. I think about the East Side Alano Club, where there's sunrise at 6 a.m. and then something else at 7. And then they've got the Essentials group at 9. And there's different groups that meet there, as well as and the South King County Alano Club. So I think that's interesting. But in the end, the club where I got sober happened when they weren't looking to add AA name. What they did is they ran out of money and borrowed money from a local treatment center that wanted to have a club in the neighborhood where people getting out of treatment could go to stay sober. And, you know, the people that were in favor of that will be quick to remind us that the money was all paid back, so it's fine. But at the time that the vote was about to be taken, the other half of the group had already staked out a new clubhouse. And when they voted to take the loan, that half of the group said, you know, we've been contributing here and half of these tables and chairs are ours, and then loading them into the U-Haul and went on the street and started the club, where when I got desperate enough, I walked up there and walked into my first meeting. So thus we grow. It's a spirit, you know, it's amazing how our bumbling in a higher power stands. We just, I feel like our traditions and the fact we rotate in service, right? By the time I understand how my position works, I'm starting something else that I don't know what I'm doing. Gives our higher power a lot of room to work. So with that, I guess I'm on with tradition 7.
Yes.
So it's hard to be humble when I've got Lara telling me how wonderful I am, but so let me read the long form. The long form. I love that it says it's more explicit. And I feel like if the only literature we ever read was just the long form of the tradition, we'd be more clear on its meaning. So tradition 7, and I will say my home group for my first number of years, we, instead of reading the short form of the traditions, we read the first couple of paragraphs of Appendix 1 and then the long form of the tradition that corresponds with the current month. So the long form of tradition 7 says the AA groups themselves ought to be fully supported by the voluntary contributions of their own members. We think that each group should soon achieve this ideal, that any public solicitation of funds using the name of Alcoholics Anonymous is highly dangerous, whether by clubs, groups, hospitals, or other outside agencies, that acceptance of large gifts from any source or of contributions carrying any obligations, whatever, is unwise. Then too we view with much concern those AA treasuries which continue beyond prudent reserves to accumulate funds for no stated AA purpose. Experience has often warned us that nothing can so surely destroy our spiritual heritage as futile disputes over property, money, and authority. Anybody that's ever been to an area assembly, boy, you know, we really drill down when it comes to what's going to be the best. We get pretty passionate about what's the best use of this dollar to help the still suffering alcoholic, and we're so sure we know. So so there's a lot in here, and Where Money and Spirituality Mix is a great pamphlet about this, and I love the 12 Traditions Illustrated. I can see the picture of the little piper calling the tune, right? He pays the, and that's it. We don't want to be obligated to anybody, so we pay our own way. So in this green card from the General Service Office, this is like F52, it says that the 7th tradition states that Alcoholics Anonymous is self-supporting through our own contributions. Contributions help cover the group's expenses. The 7th tradition is more than simply paying for rent and other group expenses. It is both a privilege and a responsibility of individual groups and members to ensure that our organization at every level remains forever self-supporting and free of outside influences that might divert us from our primary purpose. The monetary amount of each contribution is secondary to the spiritual connection that joins us in unity with AA groups around the world. And yeah, it doesn't make much difference how much I'm putting in the basket. I'm a part of the contribution. The other thing is, there's other ways to contribute. I can tell you there were times I had a home group that we had childcare in my home group, and we paid a babysitter every week. And there were plenty of weeks that I didn't have $1 for the basket, but I was giving as I could, right? I mean, I was the childcare coordinator. I picked the sitter up and brought her to the meetings and organized. We had a backup because if we had more than 8 kids down there, we had signed up on a calendar for who was going to cover half of the meeting. And so, you know, I try, you know, I can never repay my debt to AA, right? But the more I try, the more my blessings multiply. So some of it is money. Remember early on thinking, oh my God, you know, when I was out there drinking, never thought about a round for the house or, you know, emptying, you know, I just got my paycheck and, you know, the bank account's empty on Monday. But then we get to AA, it's like you could make copper wire trying to pry a penny from my cold, stingy fingers. So, you know, I've been in a position where I didn't have $1 for the basket. I've been in a position where, you know, I was able to do a little more. But I was the GSR for a group for a little while that had a very small meeting place, and the rent was high. And I felt, because we never made our splits, like a lot of groups don't. And that first home group, we were a robust group. In fact, we had enough of an overage after making healthy splits that once a year we were, you know, in the enviable position to buy a box of big books for corrections. But I was a part of this other group where, you know, after we paid for rent and bought coffee and stuff, there wasn't any money left over. And I felt like as their GSR, I needed to let them know we're not self-supporting. They said, we pay our own way. I said, but if you go down to Intergroup to buy literature and you don't find the door locked up, somebody else is paying our share of the rent. If you call down to Intergroup to ask when there's a meeting, or I don't know, I'm talking to the kind of people that like me would pick up the phone and call GSO, right? And so, the phone always gets answered. But none of that happens without money, right? And if the groups aren't making their splits, they're not self-supporting. Other groups are paying their share. Now, is that the end of the world? I mean, there's tiny little groups but again, I don't know. That's part of the reason I've been a member of an online home group for a number of years, and we never seem to have money to make splits. And it's a great group. It checks a lot of the boxes, but there's enough of the boxes that matter to me. And that's one of them that stopping for a new home group. So what else do I have to say about self-support? That's probably it. It's just like all of our traditions fortifies our unity. You know, it doesn't matter how much I drop in the basket, but when I contribute to AA, I get to be a small part of the big whole. And in our literature, it talks about, you know, for people that always had their hand out, always looking for somebody to buy me a drink, the idea that I'm paying my own way, not just monetarily, but showing up like you guys have taught me in AA, right? How can I help? Let me know what you need. You know, that's the way I show up at work and at my family. That's new. So I appreciate what you guys have taught me in the regard of being self-supporting, not only financially, but instead of being a taker, being a giver. So other comments on Tradition 7? I'm sure I missed a lot. Kelly, come on in.
I do have a question. If there's something in there that talks about the limitations, of how much we can contribute, like 3,000 a year.
It's gone up recently.
Information about that, please.
Mike, do you have an answer to that? I know it's gone up recently. Anybody know what's the limit on the contribution? Kelly and I are wondering what to do with all of our extra money.
Yeah.
5507 677.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna put Bill on the spot because I bet he knows what it is. I want to say 10. Did they raise it from 75 to 10? So that may be it. I think one of the things that I've learned over the last year or two, again, and we've talked about it, and you mentioned it, Julie, is explicit, and we know what explicit means. So when it says, you know, I put it away in my big book. Where'd it go? Oh, my iPad's on top of it. So each group ought to be fully supported by its individual members, is how I think it says it. Again, this is on top of it. What explicitly then does it mean? And by the way, it does say to reach that ideal, right? So we want to reach that ideal. But what does that mean? Does that mean, and here's the misconception I was under, that I've course corrected as a spiritual principle and a spiritual idea. My monetary contribution to Alcoholics Anonymous explicitly comes from Tradition 7. My monetary contributions go to Out to Breakfast online. This buck in the basket has no relation to Tradition 7 because of what we read explicitly in Tradition 7. I have a vote in my home group. Okay, so when I contribute to Julie's home group, can I vote, or do I have an opinion or an input on where that money goes? Absolutely not.
Right on.
And so I kind of like my money, I have to say, you know, and I want a decision where it goes. And so the only place I get that is my home group. Now, if I go to Julie's group and, well, she probably doesn't have cupcakes because they're online. But if I go somewhere and have cupcakes or whatever it might be, yeah, I'll put $1 or $2 in the basket to pay for that. But I'm a guest at your home group. I'm a guest at these meetings. In my home group, I'm a member. And I'm responsible. It tells me I'm responsible. Bill's not responsible to come to my home group and pay the rent. Vice versa. So that has been a real big revelation that really shatters this perception that goes on in Alcoholics Anonymous. $1 in the basket. I mean, do we want to live up to these spiritual ideals or do we not? Okay, I'll shut up because I'm sure the wisdom speakers behind me.
Okay, speaking of the basket, while we are passing it here, Lara has dropped some information. If you feel like you'd like to support Greater Seattle Intergroup, you're welcome to do that. But we mostly appreciate your contribution in showing up and sharing about our traditions. Bill.
Alcoholic Bill, just in terms of contributions. So from a group standpoint, there is no maximum amount you can contribute to GSO. From an individual standpoint, it's 7,500. They wanted to increase it to 10,000 this year, and it did not pass. What did pass was the bequest. That went from 10,000 to 12,500. That was the one that passed this year that went up. They did not pass the individual from 75 to 10,000. I'm sure next year it probably will, but this go round it did not.
Thank you for that.
Can I add something
comments on
else, Julie? Julie, can I add something else?
Yeah, please do.
On what Bill said, because I really think a danger to Alcoholics Anonymous is, and Bill brought it up, the idea that we need individuals to give more and more directly to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, this foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous is based on that triangle that's upside down, that is group directed. The group's direct. And when we start, and and part of that direction is the dollars, the contributions. And when we start to rely more on individuals, we are not relying on the groups. They say the groups, dollars are going down. Well, that means then as an organization, we need to be answerable to groups and maybe tighten our belt. I love I'm going to throw this out just as a side note, because I love to go to Nashville. And when you're in a bar, and I drink my 7-Up there, I like them to play my songs. Well, how do I get them to do that? Right? You brought up the tune, who pays the piper? Someone gives 20 and I give 50. Guess whose song's first? So, I just, this tradition is all about the groups and what we do together. And me as an individual group member, I have a responsibility just as my group does. So I'm done.
Well, right. And so, Bill, maybe what is the percentage of groups that actually contribute? I'm thinking it's fewer than 50%.
I do know that answer. There are 57,000 groups out there, and only 31% contribute to general service.
So what's to be done?
Well, it's interesting. I was on a concepts meeting the other day with a delegate, and that was my question to her, and I didn't get a good answer. So, there's so many since COVID, where we've kind of branched off from having registered with GSO to just having meetings. And that's part of the problem. They're just not connected to the service structure. And I don't know if that number changed dramatically from, 2020 or not, but all I know is the most current information out of the 57,000, I guess it's 31%, which was shocking to me, to tell you the truth.
Sad. All right. Anything else on tradition 7? I agree. I think, in Zoom meetings where a basket doesn't come around and it's like, oh, it's free and we just don't think about it. Maybe we have an education job to do with some of our online meetings. I don't know. I think this all comes down to awareness and education. So for those of us that are here and love AA and love our traditions, if anybody wants to get a tradition study going with your group, especially if it's an online group, here we are, ready, willing, and able to help with that. And we're on to tradition 8, and that means I get to welcome Lara.
Yay. Thanks, my name's Larry, I'm an alcoholic again. And I do wanna say, talking about tradition 7, I attend a weekly meeting of intergroup office managers from around the country and Canada. And many groups are struggling financially. And the conjecture has a lot to do with, intergroup offices, sort of struggle at least Seattle intergroup since I've been working here. And since I first got sober, intergroups asking for money. Intergroups asking for money. It's just a constant sort of beating on the drum. And the reason is because intergroup has expenses all the time, right? And just as GSO has expenses all the time. And so, yes, it's a constant education, a constant beating of the drum that these are the services that intergroup and intergroup central offices and GSO provide for our fellowship. And this is why we continue to need money all the time. And so that being said, I'll go on to tradition 8. I'm just gonna read the Language of the Heart essay. Throughout the world, which is on page 86, if anyone wants to follow along, Language of the Heart. Okay, throughout the world, AAs are 12-stepping with thousands of new prospects a month. Between 1 and 2,000 of these stick on our first presentation. Past experience shows that most of the remainder will come back to us later on. Almost entirely unorganized and completely non-professional, this mighty spiritual current is now flowing from alcoholics who are well to those who are sick. One alcoholic talking to another, that's all. Could this vast and vital face-to-face effort ever be professionalized or even organized? Most emphatically, it could not. The few efforts to professionalize straight 12-step work have always failed quickly. Today, no AA will tolerate the idea of paid AA therapists or organizers. Nor does AA like to be told just how he must handle the new prospect of his. No, this great life-giving stream can never be dammed up by paid do-gooders or professionals. Alcoholics Anonymous is never going to cut its own lifelines. To a man, we are sure of that. But what about those who serve as full-time in other capacities, our cooks, caretakers, and paid intergroup secretaries? AA professionals, are they? Because our thinking about these people is still unclear, we often feel and act as though they were such. The impression of professionalism subtly attaches to them, so we frequently hear them say making money out of AA, or that they are professionalizing AA. Seemingly, if they do take our AA dollars, they don't quite belong with us AAs anymore. We sometimes go further. We underpay them on the theory they ought to be glad to cook for AA cheap. Yeah. Now, isn't this carrying our fears of professionalism rather far? If these fears ever got too strong, none but a saint or an incompetent could work for Alcoholics Anonymous. Our supply of saints being quite small, we could certainly wind up with less competent workers than we need. We are beginning to see that our few paid workers are performing only those service tasks that our volunteers cannot consistently handle. Primarily, these folks are not doing 12-step work. They're just making more and better 12-step work possible. Secretaries at their desks are valuable points of contact, information, and public relations. This is what they are paid for and nothing else. They help carry the good news of AA to the outside world and bring our prospects face to face with us. That's not AA therapy. It's just a lot of very necessary but often thankless work. I'm gonna skip to the bottom. Let's give our service desks the hands they so well deserve.
That's it.
That's a little. No, thank you. Not much has been said about this pamphlet. This experience has taught us an introduction to the 12 traditions. I kind of refer to this pamphlet as the plain language version of the 12 traditions illustrated, because it kind of feels that way to me. But it does simplify, a very condensed version of what tradition 8 is. Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. While AA's 12-step is never to be paid for, special workers can help make our 12-step work possible. There's no professional cost of AA members being paid to carry the message. As Bill W. makes clear, while AA has to hire people where there are legitimate jobs to fulfill, what is not to be paid for is face-to-face treatment of a drunk. So, I do want to say that as a paid special worker, there's only, a few hundred of us in the country that have this job. And it's a unique kind of job that requires a certain balance. But I am careful never to answer the phone for Alcoholics Anonymous if I can help it. If there's not a volunteer on, I have to answer the phone. That is my job. But if somebody's calling to talk to a drunk and I happen to answer the phone, I transfer it to one of the volunteers, because I do not want to get paid for that work. It's my job to make sure that the lights are on and that the bills are paid and that I'm using the fellowship's money in the most efficient, effective way that I can. And I have all kinds of supports to know how to do that. I have an office committee, and there's all, the board. I essentially work for the board. I have more bosses than I care to admit, right? Everybody's my boss. And so it's an unusual job, right? It's not especially unusual to other nonprofits whose executive directors work for their boards. But it's more spiritual in nature, and as we've been talking about today. So I just wanted to, that's all I'm going to say about tradition 8. There's probably a lot more to say about it, but that's all I'm going to say about it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry. All right, I'll bet others have more to say. Kelly, come on up. Thank you.
My name's Kelly, I'm an alcoholic. Thank you a lot for reading the one passage that says we hire special workers to make that possible. Alcoholics, many of us, me included, like to penny pinch. Oh, let's save money. Oh, let's hire. Let's have alcoholics do some work. Example, American Sign Language interpreters. And pay them less or volunteer. But when alcoholics will ask people to volunteer as American Sign Language interpreters, they oftentimes will have the qualified education to pass on the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, and therefore dilute the message. So we need to hire professional American Sign Language interpreters to properly voice for the deaf alcoholic and to sign an American Sign Language for hearing alcoholics, back and forth appropriately, and make sure that the message is not diluted and not lost. And that's why it is important to pay top dollar, not top dollar, but appropriate amount. And because if we use volunteers or someone who knows some sign language, how the newcomer receive the message, if they're doing, if they're asking the kindergarten, someone in 1st grade to speak Spanish, would you understand that first grader? No, it'd be like bits and pieces of the newcomer would be mathematic question. You know, we want historic lessons that we can recover, and if we can do it in any way, they will come back. They will die out there. You want to have a strong message and having good qualified American science interpreting, but that therefore money and spirituality can mix. If it makes 12 steps possible, message. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Bill,
Alcoholic Bill, so I have written in my 12 and 12 for fun and for free, not for fee and for hire. And I love that the long form of the tradition actually gives us a definition of professionalism. It says Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, and we define professionalism as an occupation of counseling alcoholics for fee or for hire. So we do not perform 12-step work and get paid. Why is that? Well, right there in the 12 and 12, it says the money motive compromises him and everything he says and does for his prospect. Money gets in the way of this whole thing. But in 2024, the budget for AA World Service was $19.6 million. Of that, there were 89 paid employees at AA World Services for amount $9.2 million. So there are employees at GSO and AA World Services that get paid to make 12-step work possible, which is different than getting paid for 12-step work. So thanks for letting me share.
thank you.
You're here.
Yeah, it was confusing when I first heard, it's like AA ought never be organized, but we can create service boards and committees. And it's like, well, that sounds really organized. So the difference is we don't organize the carrying of the message, right? It's not like the sales fleet, where it's like, it's your turn to sponsor the new one through the door. We don't do that. We don't tell people how to do the 12-step work. But I think about at the assemblies where there's a lot of printing that needs to be done, or even our directories. We get our directories printed here at Intergroup. Well, maybe Joe, the member down the street, wants to contribute the printing. Well, what if he screws the job up, right? Be a little ungracious to complain. Where if we just hire our, go out and do our due diligence and get a quote, if they screw the job up, they get to redo it. So I think a lot of, like Lara said, I know she answers to, like at any other job, I'm evaluated at my job, she's evaluated at her job. And I've had the pleasure of knowing, office managers and assistants here at Intergroup for a long time. And not only do they come and I feel like I do at my job, thanks to AA, my employer gets an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, right? And that's what we get from our paid workers in AA. But I know that those people all, after they leave their job, like when I leave my job, they're in meetings and sponsoring and holding other service positions, right? And so there's that side of it. Those people who have paid positions for AA, or like Bill was talking about down at the general service office. I've called up, the people are pleasant, they're knowledgeable. I mean, who would be better qualified to do those jobs than members who know what we do and what we don't do and how we do it and love AA. So, I mean, it just makes sense to employ our members if they're qualified for the job. The other side of that, I think, is the people that decide to go into the field of therapy. And I think some of those people got a real bad rap for a while. And, we don't tell people in AA what they do or don't do for a job. If they want to go into counseling, God love them. But it's not the same as the for fun and for free thing. There's one other thing I was gonna mention. And if I forgot it, it's probably time to move on to the next tradition. Other comments on tradition 8? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Lily. I'm alcoholic. I got invited here by Mike and DT, and I'm so excited to be here because I'm so brand new. I am not even 9 months sober yet. Okay, so here we go. I will be tomorrow. I really liked, okay, I've been listening and how these steps, well, the traditions are stacking on top of each other. And I'm learning, from one to the other. But it really struck me listening to you guys where it said, and on step 5, it says each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose. We have that one primary purpose. But then when we come down to step 6, it says problems of money, property, authority may easily divert us from our primary spiritual aim, right? And as I was listening to all of the things that y'all were talking about that we need to be careful of and not to do and to do, that it just really, for me, it dawned on me that we have the primary purpose, right, to carry the message to the alcoholic who's still sick and suffering. But if I don't have the primary spiritual aim, right, like I'm thinking of archery, where there's that I got to hit that bullseye, and so by focusing on that bullseye in each of these money, property, authority, where you're talking about how it comes into 8, that it is what it is. This is just awesome. Sorry, my puppy dog has something now and I got to go get it out of its mouth, but I recognize the aim. I need to pinpoint my focus and have the spiritual unity. So my dog has got something. Sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, Lily.
Well, and I just looked at the clock and we've got 4 more traditions in a little over half an hour. So I'm gonna be brief with tradition 9. I love tradition 9. I'm gonna read the long form. Wait a minute, that's not right. Okay, so each AA group needs the least possible organization. Rotating leadership is the best. The small group may elect its secretary, the large group its rotating committee. Groups of a large metropolitan area, their central or intergroup committee, which often employs a full-time secretary. The trustees of the General Service Board are, in effect, our AA General Service Committee. They're the custodians of our AA tradition and the receivers of voluntary AA contributions by which we maintain our AA General Service office at New York. They are authorized by the groups to handle the overall public relations, and they guarantee the integrity of our principal newspaper, the AA Grapevine. All such representatives are to be guided in the spirit of service. The true leaders in AA are but trusted and experienced servants of the home. They derive no real authority from their titles. They do not govern. Universal respect is the key to their usefulness. And it certainly is a privilege to serve AA in any way. I'm a big believer in rotation. I mentioned earlier, because none of us really knows what we're doing. By the time you get done with your rotation, you got a little bit of an idea of what you're supposed to be doing. But, I feel like it all goes back to making coffee, right? It's like, in a perfect world, the outgoing coffee maker teaches the new person coming in so that they understand how long it takes for that urn to brew, that you've got to be there. And it's not enough for the coffee to be ready when the meeting starts. No, we want it ready 20 minutes before as people are coming in. You don't have to bring cookies. But if you bring cookies, you don't have to make them, but you can if you want, right? So you can kind of make the position your own. I mean, as long as there's coffee and creamer and sugar and cups. But if at the business meeting people say, we like tea, well, then, we answer to the group conscience. And I feel like every position is that way, right? Especially when we look at something like PICPC. I've known people that they really wanted to go out and talk with the pastors of the churches where we meet, and that was their jam. Others really like to talk to people in the legal profession or the healthcare profession. So the thing about rotation is I'm sure we've all been in meetings where somebody's like, well, I haven't wanted to be the treasurer for 20 years, but nobody will step up. And to that I say, well, then leave the money on the table. I was secretary of my home group when we had a new coffee maker. And gosh, he stayed sober for 6 months. So we made him coffee maker again. And then he got a job. So we're going to need a new coffee maker. And we're having the business meeting. And we went around the table, and one by one, everybody explained how it was not humanly possible. They could not get there early. Couldn't be done. Couldn't be done. Nobody could possibly make it happen. And so I said, well, then I guess we'll just start announcing that we have the position open and you're going to need to bring your own coffee. We're not having coffee. But Aaron out of the room, I suggested serving vodka in place of the coffee. And would you believe the sky parted, and miracle of miracles, several of these people who moments before couldn't possibly humanly have found a way to do this. And I don't know what shifted in the universe, but I'm a big believer in rotation. And I rotate. That's what I do. So, yeah, my sponsor says, you know, as long as I'm willing to do it, nobody else is going to volunteer. So that's what I've got on that tradition. Anything else that I missed on tradition 9? If not, let's move right along to tradition 10. And somebody, oh, doing tradition 10. You're on.
I am. Hi, everybody. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Bill. First, I want to thank you, Julie, for your service. I want to thank everybody else that spoke today. This has been wonderful. I'm so grateful that I was asked to speak today. So the first thing I want to do is I want to tell something. If you haven't got yourself one of these AA group pamphlets, it's called P16. This is like the owner's manual of a car. Like, I need my little owner's manual, so when I get in trouble, I can just go to page 13 and there's answers. This is my owner's manual in Alcoholics Anonymous. Has everything that you want to know about AA in 48 pages. In there, Bill Wilson says, sobriety, freedom from alcohol is sobriety, freedom from alcohol through the teaching and practice of AA's 12 steps is the sole purpose of an AA group. So keep that in mind. And, you know, I love the unity tradition 1, and I have a concordance that has the definitions in there. In unity, it says the state of being one or singleness, which dovetails with Gigi's tradition 5, that singleness of purpose. And here we are in tradition 10 that reads, and I want to read because there's to me, a big difference between the short form and the long form of tradition 10. So the short form says Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence, the AA name ought never to be drawn into public controversy. And I don't know why, but all of my sponsees seem to be short form of tradition 10 people, because they want to talk about whatever they want to talk about in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And a lot of times I have to go after the meeting and say, let's look at tradition 10 long form. And here's what it says. No AA group or member should ever in such a way implicate AA, express any opinion on outside controversial issues, particularly those of politics, alcohol reform, and sectarian religion. Alcoholics Anonymous groups oppose no one concerning such matters. They may express no view whatever. So the highlight in there is AA group or member. And one of the things that I highlighted in the literature is the phrase, as to implicate AA requires members to be sensitive to where and when they are expressing their personal opinions on politics, religion, medicine, addiction treatment, or any subject that may deter a newcomer or divert the group from carrying the message. I think that's pretty important. You know, I have two examples, and I do a lot of reading, but to me, I've learned the most about these traditions by either breaking them myself or making the mistakes. And I was in a meeting in 2001 after 9/11. I got sober in the New York City area, and I was in a big meeting. This meeting was been around for, at that point in time, 75 years. It was the Rye Harrison meeting, and there were about 150 people in this meeting. It was a step three meeting, and it was right after 9/11. And I will tell you that I would venture to say that 90% of the people in that meeting either had someone in their family or knew somebody in their, in the neighborhood that died in 9/11. So here we are in an AA meeting talking about step three. The first person raises their hand and starts talking about what happened on 9/11. The second person raises their hand, starts talking about 9/11. The third person, and of course, everybody's emotional. There's crying, there's yelling, there's all kinds of stuff going on. And finally, this guy, Peter, with 37 years, stood up in the room and he put the big book up in his hand and he says, "Folks, we have a tradition." And he literally read the long form of Tradition 10 and said, "We're in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a controversial issue." And he said, "Let's get back to step three, which is what we were talking about." And all of a sudden, the complexion of the room changed and we got back into, step three and whatnot. But that to me was a perfect example of what I shouldn't do in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sobriety, freedom from alcohol through the teaching and practice of AA's 12 steps and tradition is the sole purpose of an AA group. Another example, though, I was on an online meeting and I don't know why, but there's all of a sudden people get very bold about what they do in online meetings. And maybe it's because they're in their own house, in their own living room, and they feel like nobody's going to challenge them. At any rate, we're at a meeting and, you can have a screensaver that if I don't want to be on the screen, I can put a picture of myself or a picture of my family. Well, there was this one individual that put a picture of himself and his 5-year-old son on the screen. His 5-year-old son had a red cap with 4 letters on it, 4 white letters, and he was holding an AK-47. So what does a member of Alcoholics Anonymous who embraces Tradition 10 do in that kind of situation? Well, I chatted the secretary and I said, "Do you think that's an appropriate screensaver in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous?" And the person came back to me, "I'll get right back to you." And then all of a sudden they were inundated with other people who literally said the same thing. "What are we doing here?" So the secretary reached out to this person and said something to the effect, "Is there any way that you could take that down?" And of course, the person actually left the room and left the meeting altogether. But I have a responsibility to the newcomer that comes in, even if it's not my home group. Now, I'm not going to disrupt the meeting and say something out loud. I have to go to somebody to the side and say, "I'm not sure that's appropriate for this meeting." So it can be a very sticky situation, particularly if like I'm in a live meeting and somebody who has 20, 30, 40 years, starts pontificating on politics. It's different than somebody who has 2 days who doesn't understand what goes on in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I would like to talk to that person after the meeting because I don't want to scare them away. But somebody with 40 years of sobriety start talking about politics, if I'm the secretary of that meeting, I would say, hey, Mike, let's talk about that after the meeting, not in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a responsibility. So those are a couple examples. I'd like to hear if anybody else has any examples. So thanks a lot for letting me share.
Yes, my name is Kelly. I'm an alcoholic.
Kelly.
I have two examples. One, last year, I'm in an online meeting, someone had a coffee cup that has some political affiliation.
Good.
And, the secretary called that person, please change the coffee cup. We was to remain neutral during an AA meeting. Now the example of what a secretary is supposed to do before the meeting party. Same thing with logos in our shirts or whatever. That's another example. So we try to stay neutral. Same thing with religion. We try not to talk about baptism or that kind of thing. We do to talk about spirituality, not religion. So that's my comment.
Thanks. I could kind of add to that. You know, when we talk about not affiliating or having opinion on outside issues, particularly politics or religion, you know, we hear some cute little phrases thrown around like recovering Catholic or big book Nazi. And, you know, my big book says that God gave us brains to use. And before we parrot these kinds of things, if we could consider that we have devout Catholic members and Jewish members in our fellowship. And in my humble opinion, those phrases have no place in an AA meeting. The other thing, I was actually in a tradition meeting where it was like fight, except we were on Zoom, so we couldn't really come to blows. But somebody was sure that you're not sober if you're smoking pot. I said, well, that's an answer. We don't really have an opinion. Oh, yes, we do, he said. So I thought, I put my butt in the basket. So I called up GSO and I got a very thoughtful, detailed, well-supported with our literature response from the employee who supports and responds to questions in our area. And if anybody would like a copy of that email, it's fascinating. And I'll tell you what I learned. Everything is an outside issue, except if you're an alcoholic who wants to stay sober. If you come to AA, we have a program and it's in the book and we'll help you the way we were helped. And opinion on whether you're drinking or if you should change your sobriety. They have an opinion on anything, except we're here to carry the AA message to the still suffering alcoholic. That's it. That's all. So, anything else on tradition 10, outside issues? Thank God none of us have issues. All right, so traditions 11 and 12, it is my great pleasure. Welcome to the podium. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, sure. Thank you. You can have one for $15. I'll see if I, oh, whoops. Already now. Steve Alcoholic. What a fantastic way to spend the morning. And I've also had the experience how the traditions are layered and connected. And tradition 11, just the first part of it, public relations policy based on attraction rather than promotion. Got a couple little stories about those times. I was actually part of a few people that started a group back in the early 90s, and it started out with like 6 people, and very shortly afterwards, within a few months, we were at 80, 90 people a week. So it grew real fast. And since I was one of the ones that helped start it, in fact, started in my living room,
I knew everything. And and we were very book oriented, but not so much tradition. I mean, our group had to grow as a group, and that's how we started. So, public relations policy. We met in a church, and we were the first AA group that church had ever. I mean, maybe nobody had ever asked them before, but we were the first ones there. And it was a neighborhood church, and probably pretty well attended on Sundays and stuff. And I got a call. I was the liaison, or whatever you call it, between the AA and the church, because knew the pastor and stuff. And she said, "Well, we want to put your group in our bulletin. That you meet whenever it is you meet in the time." And I said, "Well, that sounds, that sounds great. I mean, I couldn't point to any, but I've heard that been done many times in community meeting houses and all that." So the business meeting came up, and almost as a afterthought, like it wasn't even important enough for me to mention it. I said, "Oh, the church wants to put our meeting in their bulletin." Well, the meeting went ballistic. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, how could anybody have a different opinion than me and be against it? And especially in my mind, we had AA history on our side, and AA tradition. There's no violation to put a notice that, however it was worded, questions or problems about alcohol, AA meets in the basement, on this night and this time, that type of message. I mean, the group voted it down, as if I didn't have enough resentments to worry about. So anyway, that was that. Later on, after a few years in the same place, we got there was a poster put on our table where we meet, and it said, next Saturday, the whatever, like 2-3 Saturdays down the road, we're having a group cleanup day, and all the different places, the church, all the different activities that the church hosts, they're invited to come to this big cleanup day, and they're going to have pizza and stuff like that. And so it was there. We had a business meeting, and the police almost had to be called. People had very strong opinions that the church, had no right to ask us to participate in that cleanup. And another side of the coin was, we use the facilities, so why don't we help participate in this group thing? I know intergroup was called. I don't know if GSO was called or not. And the answer from intergroup was, geez, maybe you guys better have a business meeting and take new intentions. And again, with me, I can't believe the resistance that our group had, even to the point where, hey, if you don't want to come and pull some weeds for an afternoon, don't come. But they wanted no one. There was a faction that wanted no one having anything to do with this, because it was outside of AA. And there were some traditions. This was a long time ago. I'm trying to remember, but how about common welfare? Well, the facility was common to us, and could we help maintain it? At any rate, it was a very, very divisive time in our group's history. And the big takeaway we got was, we had this, he wasn't in AA long enough to be even called an elder statesman, but he was wise. And he was one of those guys that just sat back and kind of looked at things. And he was very familiar with traditions and stuff. And he said, well, I know we're on 11, but going back to tradition 2, he said, let's take a group conscience, which is different than everybody in the group having their opinion. Let's try and let's see what it would be like to have um, being motivated for what we think God would have us be, the loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. And it was something, I use the word magical in AA, but the whole group quieted down. And we heard some voices from our group that were quite a bit different than they were a little earlier. They weren't strong, fixed ideas. They were like, well, what would a loving God have us do as a group? And so anyway, to end this one, our group decided to participate if you wanted to, because it was on a day where we didn't meet stuff. And a tremendous amount of people from our group came, although of course there's no requirement or anything. And later on, we had many people from the community come to our meeting. They didn't know, many groups met at this church, but we didn't know each other. And this was it ended up being a community thing. It ended up what we felt was the spirit of attraction. They saw, hey, here's these, here's a lawyer, here's a vice versa, and all sorts of people coming to help pull weeds that were outside of the neighborhood, which the church, drew from. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And so going back again to tradition 2, we were able to have a group conscience that was different than whatever it was, 40 individual opinions. And all in all, it turned out to be a really good experience. And there were people from the group that left. No way were they going to be part of AA pulling weeds. Although it wasn't AA pulling weeds, it was just an invitation for us. But there's reputations, there's perceptions people have of people in AA and all that. And so that's my story about Tradition 11. Our public relations policy in this situation, a real thing, was based on a group conscience, and it was an informed group conscience because people called GSO and stuff. Can we pull weeds? And for anonymity. Okay, so I guess to close Tradition 11, I think, or I found that attraction and promotion in the sense of step 11 are kind of opposites, or sorry, Tradition 11. In that example I used, I got to be part of an attractive event, and people just saw a side of AA that they liked. And as far as promoting, we still have that advertising. We just finished a discussion about that. Should we have bus advertisements or bus stop advertising? Is that going to be promotion or attraction? So I think that's going to go on and on and on. Okay, so any comments about Tradition 11? I'm moving.
I'm tired of hearing from me. A lot of times I when I was going to your group, I was the only deaf member there, and they were asking me, do I bring other deaf alcoholics to the meeting to justify the cost of the American Sign Language interpreters? And I was like, that sounds like commotion, dragging other people to the meeting. I mean, the work, when you drag people, you need to have enough to come to school. I want what you have. Now, driving them to meeting them now is a violation of Tradition 11. at the time, I didn't know, and I became very resentful and mad because of that. Because I didn't feel worthy around that person. And so, but luckily I resolved that resentment on my first job, but that's my feelings of traditional level.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
I can add, I was part of a district that between Thanksgiving and New Year's, we ran a lead ad in a little local newspaper that said, if drinking is a problem for you or somebody you know, help is available at AA, and then our intergroup phone number. And there'd always be somebody that said, oh, that's promotion, right? And we're not saying, be like, we've got some local celebrities. We can be like, hey, so-and-so comes to AA, you can come to. Just, we're not a secret society, right? We want people to know how to find us, but we maintain personal anonymity. So anyway, that's all I've got. Oh,
I'm going to sleep.
Is
Was
Bill
he
frozen?
I think he's frozen.
Oh, no. There he is. Hi,
No,
Bill.
yeah, I was gonna ask if you were gonna call on me. Thank you very
Oh,
much for your lead on traditional. So this is the public relations tradition. It's not the personal anonymity tradition. And for me, the most important story is in Pass It On page 314. In 1960, Bill Wilson was asked to just put the back of his head on the cover of Time magazine. They were going to do a wonderful story about Alcoholics Anonymous, only the back of his head, and they were going to not use his name. So in reality, he wasn't challenging Tradition 11, but here's what he said. This is two little sentences. Here's what Bill Wilson said. I estimate that it would be better for some to die and others to suffer rather than to set such a perilous precedent. Therefore, I decline the publicity, and I must confess it wasn't easy. So all I have to know is the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, 25 years sober, not really challenging Tradition 11, stepped back and said, I'm going to decline this opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of minutes for Tradition 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. And to keep this short, it says ever reminding us, does that mean me too? To place principles before personalities. And to me, Tradition 12, besides encompassing all the traditions, it also includes the steps and all that, because if I'm going to place principles before personalities, do I know what the principles are, or do I just think I do? I took a road of studying principles, and that started in 2003, and I'm still on it. And the more I study, the more I find out I didn't know. And to wrap up my talk, so we stay in the timeline, is what I found out was I found what I think is the most closely held secret in all of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it took me a long time to find it. And to share it with you, I found the secret that's hidden in the words in our first 164 pages is we do it all to ourselves. And through the principles, I got to discover that was true with me. So I didn't go over time.
Well, you can take a few more minutes. I don't think anybody minds if it runs over.
Long time.
Are you sure?
Way longer than a few minutes. Go ahead.
All right, well, Bill, comments on Tradition 12. Anybody with comments on Tradition 12? Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Steve. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Bill. I love the first sentence in the 12 and 12, or the second sentence. It says the spiritual substance of anonymity is sacrifice. Because AA's 12 traditions repeatedly ask us to give up personal desires for the common good. And to me, that's critical. What am I giving up? I'm giving up my ego. And I'll tell you, the biggest issue that I have is everybody posting their sobriety coins and alcohol on social media. That's the biggest one. To me, that's breaking anonymity. And that's not sacrifice to me. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you for mentioning that. Other comments on tradition 12 or 11? All right, that's a good point, Bill. So, thank you, everybody, for coming out to study the traditions and everybody that presented. I don't know if we're ready to close. We want to close with the responsibility statement. All right, if you'd like to unmute and join me. I am responsible
I'm responsible.
with anyone, anywhere, gracious enough
For help. I want that brand of AA to always be there. And for that, I am responsible.
Hey, good job.
All right.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.